Today I shall discuss about the degradation of polymers, polymer products which actually remain exposed to the environment. Now, polymer products are basically organic materials made of carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, sulfur, etc. Basically, if we see, there are two categories of polymers. One is purely hydrocarbon polymers and the others are polymers containing heteroatoms like oxygen, nitrogen, sulfur included in the polymer structure. So, the degradation and stability of those different polymer products containing such polymers of hydrocarbon category or category containing oxygen, nitrogen, sulfur along with carbon, hydrogen. Now, in the environment there are agencies like oxygen, heat, electromagnetic radiation, ozone. These cause the polymers to be degraded by their influence. So, when polymer products are in use, they get exposed to such agencies and they need to be stabilized with some additives or ingredients. Otherwise, the polymers will continue to degrade and the long term properties of the polymer products will gradually decrease. So, before going to manufacture any polymer product, we must know the degradation and stabilization or stability aspects of those polymer products containing the basic polymer materials inside the product and the process of their degradation and their mechanism of degradation and in which agencies in the presence of which agencies these polymers degrade most or remains more stable. That is the subject matter of this lecture. Now, environmental degradation of polymers, we mean that when polymer products are exposed to the environment, in the environment there is humidity which vary from say 30 to 95% and sunlight, oxygen, ozone, thermal effects or other electromagnetic radiations that causes degradation, chemical degradation. Degradation, I mean a polymer say having this kind of molecular configuration, this environmental agencies contain thermal influence or oxygen, ozone, radiation, etc. This degrades the polymers into shorter fragments like this, and the molecular size of the polymer as a whole is reduced. Naturally, the properties of these polymers will be affected. That means, the properties having with this the polymer molecules having full molecular length, molecular weight will not be available after it is degraded. That means, product is destroyed due to the degradation of the polymer chain. Apart from this effect of oxygen, ozone, heat from the environment, there can be agencies like microorganisms. These microorganisms may be bacteria, fungi, etc., which attack the carbonaceous materials, these polymers, and degrade the polymers. During such degradation of polymers by the action of microorganisms, they produces carbon dioxide and some biomass, and some amount of carbon is being utilized as their food from these polymers by the microorganisms. So, that kind of degradation by microorganisms in biological environment, etc., or biological influence, we can call that as biodegradation. Other than biodegradation, we can say the degradation of the polymer can be due to oxygen, ozone and radiation effects, heat effects of thermal influence, etc. So, they degrade also there to smaller fragments, and to some extent they degrade into carbon dioxide, and in the extreme situation carbon dioxide and water, in the extreme situation they degrade and form these products. Now, what is the necessary of this biodegradation or thermal degradation? Is there any necessity? Now, the thermal degradation means, or thermal degradation or degradation due to effects of oxygen, ozone, radiation, that occurs very slowly due to the environmental effect, and chemical degradation, that is called chemical degradation, and biodegradation if the products are exposed to microorganisms or biological environment, that polymers are degraded and their properties gradually changes from the time when they are manufactured. Now, today there is a need of this biodegradation. Why there is a need of biodegradation? Now, polymers being hydrocarbon in nature or carbonaceous materials like containing other than carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, heteroatoms are present. These polymers are not degradable at a very faster rate. So, when some products made out of polymers are used by humans, what happens? After the completion of the service of those products, these products need to be disposed. Now, if such products are disposed to the environment, what happens? It gets piled up at different corners, at different places, on roadsides, in the dumping ground, and causes lot of nuisance, and that is called environmental nuisance or environmental pollution. So, if such plastic or polymeric wastes are generated by the use of such polymeric products, there must be some suitable waste management mechanism or system, so that we can prevent such environmental nuisance or pollution due to the littering of that polymer wastes. Now, there are some techniques of waste management. The one is landfilling. Such polymers can be used as a landfill material, or such wastes can be incinerated so that it will vanish due to combustion, and we can get rid of piling of plastic wastes, but there is also a problem of incineration products. After incineration, that generates carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide and other toxic hazardous gases which pollutes the air in the environment. That is not desirable. Another thing is mechanical degradation. Such products can be mechanically degraded and mixed up with earth, or it can be again sent for landfilling. The last option is biodegradation. That means, if the nature itself can take care of such plastic wastes piled up due to the creation of such plastic waste materials, then this problem can be solved in a better way. That means, if the microorganisms can consume such materials as their food, then it will be slowly absorbed by the nature, as is done in case of other naturally occurring materials like wood and other carbonaceous materials from plant and animal sources, which is created by nature. So, that is a very good approach, which is the need of the day today, that people are thinking of producing biodegradable polymers rather than producing non-biodegradable polymers. Today, people are thinking of green technology, and under this green technology concept, people are trying to synthesize or modify naturally occurring polymers, which will be degraded by microorganisms. Now, what are the polymer types that need to be degraded? Say, first is the commodity polymer items in the form of films and molded items. After their use, we throw it to the dustbin or garbage. These are the nature of the polymer items which need to be degraded. And other kind of things are, say, biomedical implant items made of polymers, for example, disposable syringe, IV system, or surgical gloves, or other biomedical implant materials made of polymers. These things need to be degraded by microorganisms. Now, for such degradation, what environmental parameters we should consider for such microbial degradation? Now, temperature is the first and most important parameter. At what temperature those polymers will degrade? Is it very low or is it very high? What is the requirement? Now, there are certain regions at high altitude where soldiers or Jawans are fighting, and for them some food materials and other things are carried over there with some plastic packaging films. Now, in those areas such polymers packaging film polymers gets piled up, because their temperature is sub-zero. At sub-zero temperature, these polymers does not degrade because microorganisms cannot function at that very low temperature. And very high temperature once again, that is also we cannot think of degradation by microorganisms, where microorganisms cannot sustain, but at very high temperature if we want to degrade the polymers, that is a kind of incineration. So, that is different thing, but we have to think of a temperature range within the ambient range of temperature, so that such polymers can be degraded by microorganisms. Pressures, at what pressure? It is ambient or other, you must think. Environmental composition, is it very mild or harsh? That means, what is the agency, what are the agencies present in the environment, very harsh environment like ozone and other things, or high energy electromagnetic radiation like that, then natural or artificial environment or radiation effect. Products of degradation, that can be gaseous product, solid product or liquid product. It can be toxic or non-toxic, and we have to think whether such products could be metabolized by microorganisms or not. We have to think, then we must find out a suitable means by which the polymers can be degraded. Now, if we think of the paths by which the polymers can be degraded by environmental means, say we can think of biodegradation by the influence of microorganisms, or photodegradation through electromagnetic radiation, or oxidation by mixing some oxidizing agents or reacting with some oxidants. These polymers can be degraded, or polymers can be hydrolytically degraded, or we can say chemically degraded, say by the presence of acids and alkali. These polymers can also be degraded. Now, after degradation by these agencies, the polymers will be broken into smaller pieces called fragments of a low molecular weight. Now, such low molecular weight fragments can be mineralized, or they remain on the earth as residues. Now, in case of biodegradation, there can be of two types of biodegradation. One is aerobic biodegradation and the other is anaerobic degradation, or you can say fermentation, etc. Now, polymer in presence of oxygen is converted to carbon dioxide, water, biomass and residue. Similarly, in case of anaerobic degradation, apart from carbon dioxide and water, some hydrocarbon gas like methane will be produced, and biomass and residue will also be produced. Now, a process would be suitable if it involves low energy, if it is a low energy process, if it energy involvement is very low. In that case, we can think of degradation by enzymes, we can think of degradation by bacteria or fungi, etc. Or we have to next we have to think what are the products of enzymatic and bacterial degradation. What happens during microbial degradation? Microbes approach the surfaces of such plastic products and they will sit on the surface of those polymeric products, provided the energy is suitable, surface energy of those plastic products is suitable to them. Otherwise, those plastics cannot do not allow the microbes to sit over there, or microbes are unable to sit on the plastic sheets. Now, if there is favorable environment like favorable energy, surface energy, then microbes can sit on the plastic surface, polymer surface, and then they slowly try to get some nutrients from the substrate surface, and they metabolize the polymer and produce some enzymes and produce some metabolic products. This way they create a biofilm over the surface, then slowly they increase the population, their population, and microbial colony will be formed on the surface at different regions, and in those microbial colonies these polymers will be eaten or being converted to some other smaller fragments, simpler products, and the microbes will consume those polymers to get their carbon source, and as metabolic product they form some biofilm. This way slowly they will degrade the polymer surface, and the polymer if it is in the form of film, the film will be weak and it will be fragmented into smaller pieces. Now, we must think of what will be the kind of polymers or what will be the nature of polymers, their structures, their configurations which will be degraded by microorganisms. From the scientific point of view, we must think of what are the functional groups which are present in polymer, so that those functional groups, the presence of those functional groups will make the favorable situation for microorganisms to form colonies on their surface. So, these are ester functional group like this, ester functional group, ether functional group, ketonic functional group, hydroxyl group like this, or polymers containing carbon nitrogen linkage like this in different form, polymers containing carbon nitrogen along with sulfur like this. If such groups are present along the backbone chain of the polymer, some regions like this, or they can remain as pendant groups in the polymer, both can be possible and both are there in different commercial plastic products. Such polymers will be favorable for degradation by microorganisms. What is the reason for such? Reason is, if we think of hydrocarbon, purely hydrocarbon polymer, surface energy of such polymer products are very high, and that can be understood from the contact angle value of that polymer surface. Now, it has been found that the contact angle of polyethylene is a 90 degree. Now, such contact angles surface containing such surface having such contact angle is not suitable for microbial degradation. Now, if the contact angle value is lower than 90 degree, say it may be 70 degree, it may be 60 degree, it may be 55 degree, even less than that, then that is more favorable. Such contact angle values of surfaces are more favorable for microorganisms to sit over there, and that occurs when polymers contain such polar groups or groups containing heteroatoms other than carbon and hydrogen atoms. For example, polyester, nylon, such polymers contain ester group, ester functional group along the backbone chain, or this amide group along the backbone chain, or cellulose, carbohydrates. Those polymers are polar type of polymers having oxygen atoms attached to the polymer chain. That makes the polymer degradable by microorganism, because such polymer this surface energy becomes favorable for them. Now, we must think of what is the mechanism of enzymatic or bacterial degradation at low energy requirement, which will be a kind of efficient process, and what is the activation energy level of such degradation we must analyze, we must calculate. Now, let us look into the carbon cycle of biodegradable polymers. Now, here you see, in case of say plant system, plant kingdom, the plant bodies are formed in the nature, synthesized in the nature by photosynthesis process through the absorption of solar energy in presence of carbon dioxide and water. So, plant body is formed. These plant bodies contain carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, etc., and form complex carbohydrates. Say for example, wood. Now, wood is a naturally occurring composite made of cellulose and lignin. The cellulose and lignin in these polymers, both are polymers. Cellulose is the reinforcing fiber and lignin is the matrix material, continuous phase material, and both these two matrix and reinforcement contents are made of carbon, hydrogen and oxygen. So, we can say these materials as carbohydrates. Now, after such carbohydrates, plant materials of carbohydrate nature are available, we can modify those carbohydrate materials. We can blend those with other synthetic polymers. We can chemically modify through grafting of other chemical compounds, monomers onto the carbohydrates, and we get new materials which can be used for making products in the form of films for use in packaging industries, or we can make composites. Now, being carbohydrate nature, these polymers are degradable by microorganisms, say biodegradation. Through biodegradation of such naturally occurring materials that will produce carbon dioxide, water and compost. This carbon dioxide, water and compost can increase the soil fertility, again that can help plant growth and that can increase the crop, yield. In other way, such complex carbohydrates can be degraded by fermentation industries, fermentation process to produce a different kind of material known as polyhydroxy alkanoates, polymers, etc. And then after use, that can be thrown to the plastic box as garbage. After that, again being these materials being made of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, they are degradable by microorganisms, biodegradation, or they can also be degraded by sunlight, by the action of ultraviolet component of sunlight, and that will also produce carbon dioxide, water and some compost materials. In other way, if we think of the marine environment, in marine environment or in aquaculture, different marine organisms are produced. Those marine organisms we use for our suitable purpose. Now, few examples can be taken, say crustaceans, say prawn, shrimp, crab, etc. Now, we dispose the cells of such crustaceans. Now, those cells of such crustaceans contain a value added material. If that can be harvested from crustacean cells, we can get a polymer like chitin or chitosan by chemical treatment. Basically, this chitosan is deacetylated form of chitin, and this chitosan can be used as a very good material for making biodegradable films, or we can make composites, we can make sutures, we can make different types of value added products for biomedical application. After use, that can be that will be produced as waste, and that waste can be degraded by microorganisms once again, producing these gases like carbon dioxide, water and ammonia. These are all organic components, and this way we see that a cycle is complete from if you see the through the plant kingdom, through the animal kingdom. This way we find ultimately these products are converted to carbon dioxide, water and compost through the action of microorganisms. Now, these polymers are organic in nature. These polymers are covalently bonded, primary covalent bonds are there, and in the product form, apart from such covalent bonds, primary covalent bonds, there are huge secondary van der Waals bonds which make such polymers very strong and tough. Now, overall strength and stability of polymers are due to the large molecular size, that means very high molecular weight of such polymer molecules, and there is extensive and huge entanglement of molecules, we can say intermolecular as well as intramolecular entanglement and huge cohesive force arising out of secondary valence interaction forces. All these three different categories of parameters, they make such polymers very strong and stable in environment. Now, up to say 1970, polymer materials were designed to resist degradation. That means, people wanted to make polymers as polymers stable as maximum stability of the polymers. They wanted to develop polymers with maximum stability. That means, the polymer should withstand very high temperature, it should not be degraded by environmental agencies like oxygen, heat, ozone, etc., or electromagnetic radiation. But people started realizing after 70s in the last century that if these polymers do not degrade, when some waste is generated, there is no place to keep such waste materials. So, they need to be degraded, otherwise it will be a nuisance to the environment. So, people took this problem as a challenge to design new polymers which will be very strong and tough and durable during service, but after their use is over, they can be disposed to the environment, and environment itself will take care of their degradation without causing any harm to the environment. Now, these are the triggers, microbial effect, microbial agencies, hydrolytic environment, oxidative environment, the presence of a catalyst, etc. So, these can be used as trigger for the degradation of the polymer materials. Now, while we approach to degrade the materials, polymer materials in the environment, we must think of the degradation products, so that the degradation products should not be toxic. That means, we have to make the degradation process in such a way, so that the non-hazardous products are produced, which the nature can take care for their consumption. And such degradation products should not, hazardous or toxic degradation products should not persist in the environment and should be completely utilized by soil microorganisms. Now, biodegradable polymers, there is a huge demand of today, there is a huge demand of biodegradable polymers in the niche markets like say fast food wrappers. We know that today if we go to any shop for purchasing any food items, any snacks or even milk or oil, we find those are packed in plastic films or laminated films. So, we find there is a need of polymers for packaging application, and if those packaging materials are not degradable, then that will create huge problem. So, that need can be fulfilled if those packaging materials are produced by biodegradable polymers or made by biodegradable polymers. So, areas like food wrappers, agricultural films or agricultural mulch films, personal products, marine and freshwater applications, etc., and for compost bags, etc. So, these are the areas where biodegradable polymers can serve their functions. And environmental disposal conditions for biodegradability are composting, soil burial, in the marine environment, in wastewater treatment facility and in anaerobic digesters. Now, let us look into the examples of biodegradable polymers. Say, in the category of polysaccharides, we find polymers like starch, cellulose, chitin and chitosan, alginic acid, as well as the derivatives of chemical derivatives of these polymers or chemically modified polymers from these raw materials. These could be good biodegradable polymers from which such products can be made, or polypeptides of natural origin, say gelatin, which is a natural protein, gelatin. Now, bacteria also produces polymers known as bacterial polyesters, say polyhydroxybutyrate, or polyhydroxy valerate. In general, these polymers are known as polyhydroxy alkanoids. Now, these polymers are produced by bacteria. These are called bacterial polysaccharides. These bacterial polysaccharides are made or prepared in cultured condition, and these bacterial polysaccharides are very good raw materials for biomedical application. Now, these polymers, say starch, cellulose, chitin, chitosan or bacterial polysaccharides, particularly these bacterial polysaccharides are formed by enzyme catalyzed chain growth polymerization of monomers formed within cells by metabolic process. Starch is used for food packaging and agricultural mulch. Cellulose is used and their various derivatives are used for making polymers like say cellulose nitrate, cellulose acetate butyrate. So, many such polymers can be made from cellulose, chitin and chitosans, and as I told, a macromolecule, these are macromolecules found in cells of crabs, lobsters, shrimps and insects. Chitin fibers are used for making artificial skins and observable sutures. Alginates are a class of polymer, is a binary linear heteropolymer containing 1,4 linked alpha L guluronic acid or beta D man-uronic acid. Alginate gels are used in controlled release drug delivery system. About gelatin, gelatin is an animal protein consisting of 19 amino acids joined by peptide linkages. Peptide linkages are peptide linkage. These are peptide linkage. This is peptide linkage. and these peptide linkages are hydrolyzable. These peptide linkages can be hydrolyzed at this point. It will break to form acid and amine derivative. Acid and amine derivative or ammonia derivative you can say. So, such polymers gelatins can be degraded by hydrolysis using proteolytic enzymes used for coatings. Such polymers are used for gelatin polymers are used for coatings and micro encapsulating various drugs and biodegradable hydrogels. The gelatins can also be used for making composites along with other polymers, and these are highly hydrophilic polymers. Gelatins are highly hydrophilic polymers. Now, these bacterial polyesters I was talking about, these are produced by a wide variety of bacteria as intracellular reserve materials which are melt processable. Now, this is a kind of this is the general structure of this bacterial polyester, where R group can vary, that is a hydrocarbon chain, and X can be 0 to X or N can be 0 to 8 or higher. Now, this R can be methyl group. If this R is methyl group, it is known as poly beta hydroxy butyrate. Now, let us look into different naturally occurring biopolymers of use in biodegradable packaging films and composites. Naturally occurring biopolymers from animal origin, you can say collagen and gelatin. Now, collagen can be harvested from animal source and say we can take off fish scale. This fish scale contains a good amount of collagen. That collagen can be harvested from fish scale or other animals. And marine food industry wastes, they process such wastes to chitin and chitosan, and other polymers from natural source are lipids and fats from agricultural feedstock or hydrocolloids. Now, under lipids and fats we see beeswax, carnauba wax or free fatty acids can be available from agricultural feedstock, or proteins casein, soy, whey, wheat gluten, these can be also obtained from this agricultural feedstock, as well as these polysaccharides, cellulose, fiber, starch, pectins, gums can be available from agricultural feedstock. And from microbial sources we can get pullulan, polylactic acid, polyhydroxyalkanoate, say polyhydroxybutyrate, polyhydroxy valerate, these things. Now, regarding this soy, actually soybean, it is a seed from which we get we can get oil, we can get protein. Now, from soybean there are two kinds of proteins available. One is soy protein isolate SPI and soy protein concentrate SPC. Now, the protein content in these two different soybean products are very high, more than 90%. Very good. Matrix resin, these SPI and SPC, these polymers are very good. Matrix resin for making composites. People can make green composites which are fully biodegradable. From such SPI or SPC and some natural fiber like jute, sisal, rami. Other than this, soy protein can also be isolated in another form, what we have developed in our laboratory, that is soy milk, directly squeezed out from wet soy seed, and this soy milk is, in fact, we have used this soy milk as a matrix resin for jute based green composite, and we have found this green composite as fully biodegradable. Fully biodegradable. So, from here you see naturally occurring biopolymers from animal source or agricultural source or microbial source. We find lot of different products can be made, which we can use for biodegradable product formation, biodegradable product manufacturing. This major technology development for manufacture of biodegradable products are eco-sufficient, eco-efficient, sustainable, biodegradable plastics, and in biodegradable plastic technology we can use aliphatic polyesters and copolymers, polylactic acid polymers, starch, starch esters, other starch derivatives, and we can develop starch foam technology. We can make combination of caprolactone, polycaprolactone, which is a synthetic polymer that can be combined with starch. So, the starch polycaprolactone blend can be used for making biodegradable products. Let us stop here. We will do the rest of the part in the next lecture. Thank you.